Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on our 2022 calendar, Leading Groups in Virtual Spaces, Becoming a Better Facilitator, offered by the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maria Crowley with NASHIA, and I'm your moderator for today. Closed captioning is available by enabling it at the bottom of your viewing window. If you need any assistance for today's webinar, please send a chat to us through Zoom or go to Zoom's support site. Questions for the presenter can be added to the Q&A in your viewing window. We will address these questions at the end of the presentation. NASHIA is a nonprofit organization created to assist state government in promoting partnerships and building systems to meet the needs of individuals with brain injury and their families. NASHIA is also a membership association, and we offer several different membership categories. Please view our website for all of the available options. There are many benefits to membership, including a connection to our membership directory. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. In addition to numerous training opportunities, NASHIA offers technical assistance and consulting services. We provide support on a range of topics, and you can find out more again by emailing us. General certificates of attendance are available for today's event. You will receive an email tomorrow with a link to a general feedback form. We love getting your feedback. There will also be a link in that email for your certificate of attendance. Members, it's a benefit, receive certificates of attendance free of charge as part of their membership. Contact Amanda Neeser at the email address here on the slide if you need your complimentary certificate promo code. The certificate and evaluation links, as well as the recording and the handout, will be all available on our website later for access. For viewers of this recording, please go to Trainings on Demand on our website to find out information on how to obtain your certificate. I would now like to introduce you to today's session and to our presenter. We're going to be discussing the qualities and best practices of becoming a strong virtual facilitator and how to organize a session to be the most impactful for you and for your audience. We're also going to explore engagement tools and strategies, and you'll be able to recognize and implement these strategies in your meetings, your trainings, and your presentations after today's webinar. Amanda Tower is our presenter for today. She is a grant project coordinator for the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, which is MRC. She oversees all activities related to the recently awarded TBI State Partnership Program grant that comes from the Administration for Community Living. Amanda has spent the last year in her career working with MRC to implement learning opportunities around brain injury, initiating and supporting the new Brain Injury Council and all of the ongoing grant-related activities in her state. She has a strong background in nonprofit leadership. And prior to joining MRC, she spent 10 years uniting community members and partners to achieve common goals. Amanda is also on NASHIA's board of directors and serves as our training and education committee chair. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. All right, wonderful. Just give me one moment to get set up here. All right. Thank you, everyone, for having me today. I'm very excited to be bringing you this content and talk about what it is to be a facilitator, especially in these virtual and hybrid spaces that we're all existing in these days. Some of this information may be familiar to a lot of you. I hope to bring some new information to you, but I'm very excited to show you what we have offered today. So as Maria said, our objectives today are to recognize quality facilitation skills, apply best facilitation practices, and to utilize virtual engagement tools. I hope to share some practices with you that'll make facilitating virtual and hybrid easier. The techniques that I'm going to show you today are universal, as I've mentioned, both virtual, hybrid, and even in some in-person settings. And throughout today, I am going to be using the word sessions to describe a lot of what we're doing. The goal of today is that these techniques can be used in trainings, presentations, but also advisory board meetings or even regularly scheduled work meetings that you may have. The goal is for you to be able to walk away with some tools and some best practices around better facilitation. So agenda for today, we're going to talk about what it is to determine a good facilitator, how to prepare for a session, some engagement strategies, and follow-up facilitation. And I say follow-up facilitation because we know that when you close a session, that doesn't necessarily mean that your time as a facilitator is over. Even as Maria said in the very beginning, she's going to be following up tomorrow with emails with evaluations. And those are all pieces that are important to keep in mind when you're facilitating. Technology for today. So as Maria mentioned, the Zoom features we'll be using. There's the Q&A box located on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen. That is the best place to put questions. It allows Maria as a moderator to be able to determine which questions have already been answered or be able to group questions. So from a facilitation standpoint, it does make it very easy for you to put questions into the Q&A box. And then we welcome any chat, reactions, anything else that you would like to go into the chat box. Some tools that I will be utilizing today are Mentimeter and Google Jamboard, and additionally QR codes. So part of today is about becoming familiar and comfortable with some technology tools that exist. I'll be using a variety of interactive tools, as interactive as we can be in a webinar format. And while we won't use everything at our disposal, the goal is to be able to discuss some of these and how you can use them with your audiences. I do highly encourage everyone to utilize different tools purely for practice sake today. If you have not asked questions many times in a Q&A box, I encourage you to just ask a question so you know what it feels like from the audience perspective to put something into the Q&A box. For QR codes, if you have a mobile device on hand, that does make it easiest to use QR codes, which I will describe, are little black boxes that you'll see pop up on the screen. If you've never used them before, I encourage you to use them today. Familiarizing yourself with different features from the audience point of view makes it the easiest for when it comes time for you to facilitate and incorporate these tools into your presentations. You'll be able to guide your audience through how to use it because you've seen it through their side. Lastly, outside of the Zoom account and platform that we're on, the tools, Mentimeter, Google Jamboard are all accounts that are actually free for you to sign up. While you won't access to all of the fancy features that they have available, you can create free accounts with these. So I wanted to make sure that what I was using was accessible if you had any interest after this to go and try it out on your own. So what determines a good facilitator? I'm sure what immediately comes to mind for you are times where you've seen really great facilitation and times where you've seen really poor facilitation of meetings. And I encourage you to think in this moment of what made these experiences, what made you feel that way about those experiences? Was it the content that was being presented, or was it how it was structured and how engaging it was? And what makes you feel best when you're going to leave a session? I personally need to feel accomplished or feel like I've achieved something by the end. So this is a time to just sit back, reflect for a moment on times where you've seen positive facilitation and poor facilitation. And I know that in the last couple years of COVID and doing things virtually and working in a virtual space, we've all experienced both. All right. So the first part we're going to jump into is the virtual U best practice. So I really broke this down into 4 pieces: your camera, the noise, the virtual background, and your name. So your camera is the nonverbal way that you can communicate with your audience. Your camera being on, making sure that it's centered on you, that you can see your face, your whole face, maybe even your upper body, is important because that's how you're going to communicate facial expressions and other body language with your audience. For example, the way that mine is set, you can see my upper body, but I also recognize, for better or for worse, I talk a lot with my hands. It helps add emphasis to my sentences. It's what makes me feel comfortable. And actually, when I point it out, even to myself, makes me a little self-conscious about it. But I recognize that that's something that I do in a way that I communicate with people. I can be very expressive with my hands. So I think that's an important thing. And that's an important way about how I communicate with people. And I think it's important for people to be able to see that, because I feel like it adds a little bit more to my communication style versus if it was only on just my face, I would actually have a really hard time with it being zoomed in on only my face. When it comes to your background noise or your background visuals, we're working in a variety of spaces. You might be working at home or you might be working in the office, and all of these places come with coworkers and pets and kids and roommates and neighbors mowing lawns. There can be a variety of visual and auditory distractions that happen, and not all of them are within your control. So as a facilitator of a session, it is important that you control as much of that as you can. Different things that you can do are by using a headset with a microphone like I'm using today, versus if I had it just on my laptop, you would actually be able to hear my neighbor working on his car right now. As for your visual background, it's important that the space behind you is clear of distractions. That might be people walking through if you're in an office. And the best way to do that is either how your camera is set up or doing something like I have, which is just a blurred background. So that way, even if there was movement, it's not overly distracting to the audience that I'm presenting to. And the last piece is around the name and how you're being displayed to your group. So make sure that as the facilitator, you're setting the example for how you want people to identify themselves. I personally think it's important to include my pronouns. I have she, her pronouns, but I do that to make sure that I'm being inclusive to everyone that might be in a session with me. It's important to include your organization or your role in the meeting as well. I say role because when your audience pulls up the participant list, it's easier for them to see who maybe the Zoom tech person is, the presenter, the facilitator. If you're identified that way, it makes it much easier for them to ask direct questions to the appropriate people. And just to also note, if you're having a session where it's a hybrid setting, where you may have a Zoom meeting, but have a group of people who are attending the meeting together from an in-person setting, such as like a conference room, it is extra important that they remain on mute so that that background noise isn't overtaking, because there's too many people on one Zoom box, as we refer to it as. But you want to make sure that everyone in that setting, that the camera's set up so that everyone on the Zoom screen can see people in the conference room, but also making sure that it's set up in a way in the conference room with projectors or large TV screens so that everyone in the conference room can see the Zoom attendees as well. keeping your background noise to a minimum, as I said, or keeping the group icon on mute. And another great practice is for the conference room of people to designate a speaker from the group. So when they do come off mute, there's somebody specific who's going to talk on behalf of the group versus having that all around discussion in that space. So up next, we're going to do our first activity. And this activity is what determines a good facilitator. So up on the screen, you'll see a black box with a bunch of black dots in it. And that is a QR code. Maria is also going to put a link in the chat if that's easier for you to use. QR codes are considered quick response, is what QR stands for. And how you use them is you can use a mobile device, tablet, or phone, and open up the camera app on that device. And when you hold the camera up to the square, a link should pop up and you can tap it and it will take you to the Mentimeter app. And it'll ask this question and you can put in 3 words that you think determine what is a good facilitator. And then, as you can already see, it's going to start to build a word cloud for us. So as people add in words, the words that get repeated are going to become larger or bigger or more centered. So I see a bunch of responses coming in there, which is great. QR codes can be a great addition, especially in a webinar format, or even in in-person settings, that you can add a little bit of engagement to some type of presentation where it's like this, where it's very one-directional. So these can be great for individual participation in this type of setting. So I see lots, it's moving around, so many words coming in. I love seeing that. Outside tools like this tool, Mentimeter, and using the QR codes can be great in also hybrid settings and in person. So I know a lot of us are going to start going back and doing things in person. If you give a presentation, putting a QR code is a great way for an audience to individually engage with the presenter to get to have that participation without necessarily raising your hand and speaking. And they're great for hybrid audiences because people can all participate without it being a Zoom poll or something where you have to be on the web-based platform in order to participate. So as I said, Mentimeter, you can set up a free account with Mentimeter. I believe it only allows you either 2 or 3 slides that have some pretty basic features, word cloud being one of those. But another great thing that I love about this tool is that it embeds with PowerPoint. As you see, there's a plugin for PowerPoint, so I could just pop that into my presentation and it would automatically live update as this came in. So that's excellent and makes to have really engaging presentations, which I think are fun. So I'm looking at our word cloud, and some things that are in the middle that are the biggest are engaging, knowledgeable, prepared. I also see patience and flexibility in there, interactiveness, organized, all great words to describe facilitators. I don't know if anyone wants to add additional thoughts, you're welcome to put that into the chat as well. I think what I wanted to start off with doing this is that the words that you're putting in of what determine a good facilitator, you should really keep in mind for when you are a facilitator. So you're putting these in, and it's best for you to keep this in mind to know that that's what your audience is looking for from you. So I love that one of our words in the middle there is preparation, because my next slide is about preparation being key. So session preparation is one of the most important pieces. It helps make your session meaningful, successful for everyone involved, and helps the facilitator be able to, if anything comes up or goes wrong, you can be flexible in that moment. So it's really important for that preparation so that way you're prepared for anything that might come up. So structuring your agenda is one of the first pieces of preparing. Setting an objective or a goal for your session. And I say this for meetings and for presentations. It's always necessary. It keeps your audience on task. Things you should be asking about are what are you hoping to accomplish during a session? How is your audience going to participate in accomplishing that goal? And does your audience know your objectives for the session and how they're going to contribute to it? Setting the objective really keeps people on task and know why they're there and the purpose for it. We all want to know that what we're doing is going to have meaning in our day. As you saw at the beginning of the presentation, I went over learning objectives, same with Maria. So that's similar to what we would do in trainings and presentations, is set those learning objectives. Meeting objectives might say, you might start off saying, this is our 1 or 2 tasks that we're hoping to accomplish during this time. We all want our time to be, we all want our participation to be worth our time and energy. I'm sure many people have gone into meetings in the past where you're really unsure about what the goal was, or you kind of leave feeling like, did we do anything during that? And that's not how you want anyone to leave a session when you're facilitating. Everybody's time is valuable, and you want to make sure that everyone is valued coming into your spaces. So as you're organizing your agenda, it's important to consider organizing for effectiveness. And I say this around scheduling breaks if they're needed or necessary, but making sure that the breaks fit with the natural flow of your session or your meeting. Making sure that there's opportune times for how you're going to answer questions or anything like that. And make sure that you have engagement activities planned in. So engagement activities, you want to kind of break things up. I know that for me personally, if I listen to a lot of content and there isn't an opportunity for me to engage, it gets really hard for me to focus. I will definitely be that person with a squishy ball, or I need something in my hands to try to keep encouraging that engagement throughout a longer session. But as a facilitator, you have to think about how are you going to engage everyone and make sure that it's equitable. So we're going to talk a little bit later about some engagement strategies that you can use, but you always want to make sure that you're using a variety of engagement strategies, whether they're so that people can engage verbally and non-verbally within your sessions. A consideration I have down here is around how you structure it and what order you place things. The heavier content, quote unquote, that maybe takes a lot more cognitive focus is better at the beginning of a meeting. And I say this because we launched our advisory boards last year. And as we were setting up our advisory board, and which are made up of 50% individuals with lived experience of brain injury, we took feedback around how we needed to structure our agendas if people felt good, especially during the first 6 or so months of meetings. We wanted to make sure that everyone was feeling like they could engage and that things were structured the way that was going to be best for them. And feedback that we got was things like breakout rooms or heavier content. They really wanted to have at the beginning of the meeting when they were the most cognitively alert and prepared, but that as the meeting went on, it becomes tiresome. So they wanted to have more of those listening activities. Maybe they could turn their camera off. That should be in the second half of the agenda. And that made sense to me. I know that when I try to attend things, in the beginning, I can come in very excited and ready, but as the hour goes on and comes to the end, you start looking at the screen being like, okay, there's 2 more minutes left. So knowing that that's a natural thing for our brains to be doing, you want to organize your agenda, taking those things into account. Other things that I had feedback on around sending out the agenda was the size of the text when I was sending emails or setting things up, using large text so it was a little bit more accessible for people. So depending on your audience, just keep those types of accessibility things in mind. So registrations and invitations. The registration process, if there is a registration process for your session, is just as important. You want to make sure that your titles are short and descriptive. We always want to make sure that when people are glancing at their calendars, that it's easy for them to know exactly what meeting is coming up, because they may not be looking days ahead of time. They might be looking only a few minutes ahead of time and be like, what meeting is this about? And if that's all portrayed in the title, people feel a little bit more prepared coming in. Include pertinent information in attachments, so meeting descriptions, agendas, slides, anything that somebody might need in order to engage fully in the meeting is important for them to have ahead of time. As I said, it's also important to make sure all of your information is accessible. Your Word documents are set up so that they're easy to navigate. Your PowerPoints are able to be screen read. All of those pieces are always important. Registration, asking people if they need accommodations in order to attend a session that you're in. So anything like that that people might need ahead of time is important and helps you better plan for your session as a facilitator. And I highlight this a lot. Double check your features of your virtual platform that you're hosting as a facilitator. There are so many different meeting features that you can turn on and off in WebEx and Zoom and Teams as you're setting something up. So it is important to become familiar with them and make sure that what you're turning on and off is going to be best for you. I say this in things you can features that you can turn on and off. And the way that I like to set things up is automatically muting participants when they come into a session. You never know if somebody is joining and has background noise, isn't quite ready. So I turn it on that they're automatically muted when they enter, so that way they don't have to worry about that. You can either make the camera be required to be on or off when they come in. Same thing with participants or hosts or panelists. And one of my favorite features of Zoom is turning on auto-saving the chat for every meeting. I turn it on for every meeting, so that way I'm not halfway through a session and go, I wish I turned that on, or there were such great ideas in the chat and I didn't get a chance to capture it. So I turn those features on, but if you have a Zoom account or a WebEx account, I do suggest that you just take the time to click around, learn the features. You can't break Zoom, you can't break WebEx. So I think just clicking around and learning them, so that way you know what is going to be best every time that you set something up. And you can save features in templates and different things, so that way when you go to set up the next one, that's just, those features are already automatically turned on. It's pretty simple to do it that way. Preparing for roles. So I have a nice little graphic there. I did structure it this way by putting the audience on top. By no means does this mean any one role is more or less important than the others. I want to recognize that the audience, I would not be here as a presenter if there was not an audience to present to. But also you as an audience wouldn't be here if there wasn't content. But everything that I'm doing today is with the audience in mind. I'm presenting to you and giving you information. So when you're facilitating or presenting, your role really is to anticipate or ask the needs of the audience. What are they looking for? What are they going to need throughout the session? What types of directions are they going to need? Anything to that degree has to be built from audience first. So in that next level, we have facilitators, tech supports, and presenters. Facilitators or moderators bring the leadership to the sessions by keeping people on point, moving through agendas. They are the people who hopefully help people feel accomplished by the time the session is over. Tech support, I could be biased because this is a role that I have frequently, is really that behind the scenes support person who maybe is answering Zoom questions if people are having trouble on the platform, is helping muting people, unmuting people if they're having trouble finding those buttons on their own, giving those types of directions. And presenters, maybe bringing presenters or speakers are the ones who are bringing the material and topics for discussion. And depending on the session, you may have other roles, panelists, recorders, note takers. There's a variety of roles that can exist in a meeting. By no means is this an all-inclusive list of all the roles that exist within a variety of sessions. So, and these roles are also just as important. I love when somebody volunteers to take notes. It doesn't mean that they're any less important, just how they're depicted here. It's also important to keep in mind that depending on the session that you're hosting, you may have multiple hats. I know there have been multiple times where I've been a facilitator, but also the tech support person, or I've been a presenter and also a facilitator. So keeping in mind what roles are you playing is always important. And this is really good to go over prior to opening a session so that everyone knows what their role is. How often, it is important because Maria and I, for example, went and talked about when are we going to be answering questions, who's going to be monitoring the chat. You want to designate everybody's roles so they know how to best participate in the meeting. And that goes for the audience as well. So our role here is to also ask, what do you need from us? But encourage you guys to ask questions, use the chat, put in a variety of reactions. That's your role as an audience, is to take in some of this information, hopefully take down some notes, learn some pieces, but also ask questions of myself and Maria as this session goes on. All right, so I wanted to also show everyone another way, and this is just as we used before. This is a Mentimeter tool. The QR code is there on the right, so as a reminder, you can scan that with your phone by opening up your camera app and clicking the link, and then you can vote. And as different votes come in, you will see the bar graph change. I like using these things for especially in-person presentations. If you just want to get a feel for if people needed a break, that this is a way for people to not have to look around the room and see who's raising their hands or not raising their hands. It allows for people to participate without feeling like they're put on the spot, but it also gauges your reaction from everybody in the room. So this has, I'm seeing we have plenty of people that say, no, let's keep going. Obviously, you're welcome to get up, stretch, get some water, do whatever it is that you need to do for a moment if that's what you need. This was really a way for you to show just how you can utilize polls. And I know that Zoom has features For polls, again, I like Mentimeter for hybrid or similar to this webinar format, just as another outside tool. And QR codes are, as I said, they can be really great for engagement tools. There's plenty of, if you type QR codes into Google, there are plenty of free QR code generators. Sites like Mentimeter will offer, like, you can download, you can either copy a link or you can download a QR code or download an embedding code. So it'll give you different ways for you to distribute the information. But typing into Google QR codes, there's plenty of free QR code generators. So you could do this for any website, additional materials. If you wanted to direct people to a PDF, they can be used for anything, which is also a really fun way to include that. All right, so we are going to keep moving along. Engagement and interaction. So engagement was one of our biggest words in the middle of our word cloud at the very beginning, which is really important. You want to make sure that you as a facilitator are keeping your content engaging. And that might be through audience participation. That might be who you are as a presenter. A variety of people find different things engaging throughout a session. So launching a session, what I find best as a facilitator is to always open at least a little bit early. I usually like to log into meetings a few minutes early, but if I'm presenting or it's a larger group, I like to go in 15, sometimes even 30 minutes before. If there's a lot of panelists, I do like that 30-minute mark beforehand. And this time is to be used by reviewing the agenda, technology features with the presenters, and it allows everyone a chance to test their technology. I can say that Maria and I logged in early and I have 3 screens in front of me. So I had to test sharing my screen and knowing what box I had to put on what screen in order for it to be set up the way that I was going to feel the most comfortable presenting. So I wanted to make sure my speaker notes were on the big screen in front of me where my camera was located. So that way, as I was reading my speaker notes, I'm also looking at you. Versus where my Zoom boxes are and the actual slide presentation are on different screens. So it gives that moment to prepare and test those types of features, trying out, testing the QR codes. I was doing that last night with my fiance. It was a wonderful sport. So testing those types of technology all ahead of time to make sure that everyone can access it. The other things to do when you're logging in early are to determine who's going to monitor the chat, the questions, when are questions going to be asked. As Maria said, we're going to do questions at the end, just so we can get through the content and then open it up for people to ask questions if they may need to. And then the facilitator, letting people know how to maybe interrupt if there's technical difficulties or pause or ask people to slow down. I find with presenters, a lot of the time I have to have those discussions around the speed in which they're talking or sharing information is really important because you may have interpreters being like ASL interpretation or CART services available. And the speed at which they're talking, I've had to frequently interrupt presenters and say, I need you to slow down just a little bit, or we need to take a pause so we can switch interpreters. So you need to know the best way, and the presenter needs to be aware that that will be something coming up throughout the session. And then as you're launching your session, it's important to review the technology features and the agenda with the audience again, inform them of all of the things that you discussed in the beginning, how they're going to be asking questions, Q&A boxes versus chat, and how to maybe access certain features. So such as closed captioning, how to turn that on or off. it is important to remember that anything that you say at the very beginning is also important to write and put in the chat for later on, because you may mention something at the beginning, but those directions on how to turn in closed captioning after other people have logged on, they've missed that. So it is important to have those directions typed up and sort of ready to go, and say, for those of us just joining, here's how you turn on closed captioning. We're taking questions at the end. I honestly will just copy and paste that and put that in as every 10 or so people that join, just so that everyone knows what is expected of them as an audience member. In hybrid settings, this might be something that you ask somebody, if other people are joining, designate somebody in that room to walk somebody through, or say, hey, we're taking questions at the end. Are things on mute? So-and-so is our designated person to speak when we come off mute. Just so that way, even if people are joining the conference room or the live space, they also know what to expect. And then introductions of key participants. Maria did a lovely job of introducing me at the very beginning, but you want to make sure that you know, your audience knows who's presenting and what their role is. Who are they going to go to if they have Zoom questions, anything else that might be pertinent to them as an audience member. So engagement strategies. There are a variety of engagement strategies, but it is important, as I said earlier, to allow people the engagement in both verbal and nonverbal ways. So this could be allowing people during a meeting or a session to raise their hand to ask a question and come off mute, or allow them to put questions in the Q&A box or the reactions into the chat, making sure that you're switching up and reaching how every person might want to engage, because not everybody is the type of person to want to come off mute or come on video. Others might just prefer to engage in the chat box. That doesn't mean that they're not engaging. If they're not speaking, it just means that that's not their preferred method. It's always important to model and explain when you're using new features. For example, the QR codes, I knew would probably be new to a lot of people. It's something that's been around for a little while, but I feel like it's been something that people have overlooked a lot of. It's just that thing that's maybe a sticker in a box. I haven't really looked at it before. I haven't really used it. So I wanted to make sure that everyone here knew how to use it and had those step-by-step instructions on how to use a QR code, because it might have been new and you might not have seen it before in a presentation format. So modeling and explaining how to use those new features is important so that your audience knows how to engage with you. Preparing any facilitated discussions or questions is also important. If there's going to be that open time at the beginning, you want to make sure that as a facilitator, you maybe have some questions to pose to the audience to start some discussion around. I sometimes like to have those questions ready to go, so that way I find posing questions helps generate questions sometimes. So it's good to have those ready. And then being okay with silence. You as a facilitator or a presenter have looked through your PowerPoint or your presentation or your agenda over and over and over again, and you know it like the back of your hand as you've prepared for this session that you're going into, and it is the first time that your audience is seeing it potentially. They might not have opened the agenda ahead of time. And so when you ask a question of the audience, a good rule of thumb is counting till 10, giving people time to think, and being okay with that silence during that time. It allows people to type out what they need to type out in the Q&A box or in the chat box, allows for technology lags, all of those things. So you want to make sure that you give that time, and it's not, are there any questions? No. All right, move on. that's not really genuinely asking if there's questions from your audience. So being mindful of that. And one way to sort of help with preparing for these discussions or questions is sometimes during the registration process, you are able to put in or let people pre-submit questions. So this can also help presenters and facilitators know what to expect or what their audience is looking for. So that can be another great way to get ready for something. So some interactive tools. There's a variety of tools that exist out there. A lot of the time, I like to take large groups and break them into smaller groups. Especially if we're looking to have some really focused discussion or really looking to get something done. Breakout rooms that I've used have been in Zoom and Teams. I believe you can in WebEx, but I'm not as familiar with that platform, so I apologize. Collaborative boards. So Zoom has a feature now, which is Zoom Whiteboard. So does WebEx, where people who are on the Zoom platform can put ideas onto it's as if you're all writing on a whiteboard together. So you could do whatever activity that you could think of, and putting sticky notes, a variety of things up there like that. Google Jamboard is the Google version of this. I like to use Google Jamboard because it doesn't, especially for a hybrid setting, so everybody could participate. You don't have to be on the Zoom platform or the WebEx platform to participate in that board. So that can be really helpful if you're in a hybrid setting. Polls are great. Zoom has some polls that you can build in when you're setting up something. But as we use today, Mentimeter is that sort of outside third-party tool that can be used for hybrid settings as well. Collaborative documents, so setting up Google Docs or Office 365 has it now where people can work on the same PowerPoint or Word document together and see what everybody's working on. And QR codes are a great way to sort of mix up the engagement of your audience and are great for both in-person and hybrid and virtual. And if there's other things that you like to use, or if there's other platforms, I do encourage everyone to put any ideas that they have into the chat. I would love to see other resources. These are things that I personally am familiar with, but I am certainly that person who's always excited to try something new and see how I can fit it into what I'm working on. All right, wrapping up. So as I said in the beginning, facilitation does not end when you close your session. It is important at the end to make sure that you review your notes and any shared materials. You're following up in a timely manner with everyone, and you're sending either thank yous, maybe reminders or updates with materials. So that last step is that post-evaluation that you guys are going to be filling out tomorrow. That last piece of facilitation is just making sure that you're following up with your audience or your teammates after a meeting to make sure that they understood everything. They saw the notes, everything was recorded the way that they thought, and they know when the next thing is for them to participate in. So that facilitation piece, and while a lot of the time you may overlook it as not being key, I personally love to have the reminder and know that we've discussed something, it's all set, and know what my action steps are next. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Maria. So if there's questions, I do encourage everyone to put them into the Q&A, and we can also take a moment to look at the chat too.
Amanda, thank you. That was great. And there are questions in the Q&A, and we'll just quickly read through some of those for all of you. First question was a good morning. It's a person who facilitates an in-person peer support group for adults. Her questions are, how do you find activities, speakers, and what games have you used to engage the group? Anything additional you want to add there?
For in-person settings, trying to think. I mean, a lot of the time, like icebreakers, especially if it depends if people know each other. I like, as I said, Mentimeters, taking polls. It stops people from feeling like they're on the spot in that type of participation. So Mentimeter is something that you could have on your phone and say, does everybody need a break right now? And you don't even have to project it. And you can say 85% of people want a break right now. So I think that can be a really great tool to use. But yeah, any type of icebreaker activities. My previous role, I was a childcare and camp director. So if you need icebreaker activities, I have lots of those.
Great. Another question from the same person. How do I draw a group to us? I created flyers and contacted other agencies, but there's no activity in my second location.
I have found that this can be really important about how things are titled. I have found when I label things appropriately and call out for a specific audience, that is when I get the most amount of sign up for something. So if for example, I previously did a session for brain injury and the overlaps between brain injury and homelessness. And I labeled the session brain injury for homeless service providers. There were 300 people that registered because right in the title, they knew that that session was for them. They didn't need to go into the description. They didn't need to read through and decipher whether or not it was going to be helpful for them or not. They could read the title and click and go. I think if we really think about how we're reading through our emails and how much time we have available, that's how much time your audience has available to be looking at things. So meeting people where they're at is always the most important thing. And so I have found those really descriptive, short, sweet titles, which does take a lot of wordsmithing sometimes, is really the best way to get that registration that you're looking for.
Would you agree that for people who are visually engaged, it's also good to have things that are visually appealing?
Yes. So especially if you're sending something out like constant contact, emails, those kind of things, putting in images that are going to pique somebody's interest of like, oh, that's a population I work with, or that's a topic I'm interested about, making sure that you're conveying it in a variety of ways is important.
Awesome. Lots of questions about QR codes. How can I access a QR code if I'm participating in a webinar on my phone?
Yeah, so you can open the camera app on your phone, and when you hold it up to the screen, your camera will actually automatically read it for you, and you just tap it and it takes you right to the website. I encourage you, I'm sure if you, wherever you live, I know that like if I go for a walk in my town has put QR codes on like get to know you information, maps of different hiking trails. So try using QR codes elsewhere in your life and then start to incorporate them into your presentations to link to different websites or documents that you may want to enhance your presentations with.
Great. I think I know the answer to this. Is the QR code generation and word cloud creation available for free?
Yes, it is. I like the Mentimeter because those two, I have a free account with Mentimeter. And so what you saw today was through the free account.
And Mentimeter produces the word cloud, correct?
It's one of the platforms that produces the word cloud. It's the one that I found to be the easiest. There are lots of platforms out there that will produce a word cloud, but this is the one that I found the easiest for a webinar format.
Any advice for meeting agenda planning to try to avoid cramming too much in a 90-minute period?
Yeah, that can be tough. It is really important to think about how much time you're going to be giving things and make sure that people have time to digest material. There's been a lot of times where I've had really ambitious agendas and had to say, you know what, that's going to be better next month. I want to make sure I have time to have discussion and genuinely solicit feedback from people and leave that time and space in there. For like a 90-minute meeting, I do in our advisory board groups are 90 minutes. We do put a 10-minute break in the middle of the meeting. So really that meeting's 80 minutes. And so about 40 minutes in, we take a 10-minute break and have 40 minutes of content. So thinking about what can you really squeeze into 40 minutes is important to be mindful of how much content are you giving people. And if it's overloaded, you're going to lose your audience.
Sure. Speaking of engagement, I'm trying to get through as many questions as we can. Do you have any tips for groups that are supposed to be participant driven, but the participants are not engaging?
I find giving people as much material ahead of time as you can. So really front loading people and letting them know the expectations of engagement for when they're coming in. That I find to be the best, because you want people coming in that know and expect that they're going to be engaged. They've reviewed materials. They've, please prepare 2 questions ahead of time for this part of the presentation. Really give those directions for how that audience is going to engage. I personally do not like walking into a space not being put on the spot. That makes me uncomfortable. So I am certainly somebody who tries to front load as much as I can, because that's what I prefer in a space. So front loading as much, because then your audience isn't left feeling that like awkward. Is this what they're looking for? Is this not what they're looking for? So front load, front load, front load.
Gotcha. Any tips related to hosting hybrid meetings and keeping both groups engaged at the same time?
Yeah, I would say hybrid meetings are great places to do breakout rooms, because your in-person group can have a discussion together, but your virtual group can break off into their breakout rooms and have other discussions together as well. So finding ways to maybe incorporate breakout rooms to have those more facilitated discussions can be helpful, so that everybody gets equal amount of engagement in that way. And then also, as I said, designating speakers to ask questions, leaving space specifically during question times. All right, we've heard from our Zoom group, our hybrid space or in-person space. Do you guys have any questions? And they may have, maybe generating a list during that time.
Gotcha. Maybe last question. I know we're coming up on time, and I would love to know if you guys in the chat would love to hear more about this topic, or perhaps have NASHIA host a deeper dive related to meeting facilitation. There's a delay if you have 2 Zoom rooms when someone is speaking, the host. So if anyone else speaks, it interrupts the dialogue. Any suggestions on how to avoid that?
Yeah, I will say virtual is really tricky, especially if our technology is a little glitchy sometimes, that, people don't quite hear somebody speaking. So it does take a little bit of practice for people's engagement to know, when somebody is going to speak, or, waiting for those right pauses. I don't have a specific tip other than, there are visual reminders on the screen. Like right now I'm looking at mine, and there's a nice green box that shows that I'm the speaker at the moment, and then it's going to switch to Maria in a second. So keeping a look for those visual cues, but also reminding your audience that those are visual cues to show who's speaking at that time, and that your audio might not. That's also an indicator of when your audio isn't working.
Great. Amanda, thank you so much. This is great information, because all of us facilitate any number of meetings in person and hybrid.
Yeah.
This wraps up this session. Just a quick reminder, we hope that you enjoyed today's webinar. We do host other events, and our events are located on our website. Here are just a few. We do have an upcoming workshop called Paying It Forward, the power and process of brain injury peer supports. We hope you guys join us for that. And just a thank you. Please contact us if you want to receive notice of future events. And don't forget that your evaluation is coming in the email tomorrow. And have a great day.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.